MPT to serve all of our diverse communities and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you. Live from Maryland Public Television, this is Direct Connection with Jeff Salkin.
Good evening and welcome to Direct Connection. We begin tonight with Maryland's response to the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. The state legislature has created a new task force to look into police accountability issues. Joining us is the chair of that task force, Delegate Vanessa Atterbury. Delegate, thank you for being with us. Tell us about the scope of this and your first order of business.
Thank you for having me this evening. So in terms of the scope, the work group, which was established and announced by the Speaker of the House, Adrian Jones, and my chair of the Judiciary Committee, Luke Clippinger, are going to take a look at some very specific things. We're going to take a look at policies and procedures and how police look into incidents and police misconduct. We're going to take a look at the use of force and whether the state needs to have one standard in terms of use of force and arrest procedures. We're going to take a look at body cameras and when and if that footage should be released. And finally, we're going to take a look at best practices in terms of independent investigators when there have been crimes done by law enforcement.
You have young kids, two of them boys. What does this mean to you on a personal level?
You know, the past few days have actually been really difficult. It's difficult for anyone to take a look at the video and what happened to George Floyd. And I, like you said, I think about my three children, specifically my boys who are only 8 and 6. And when the Trayvon Martin incident happened, which didn't involve police, but it was a horrible incident that involved someone connected to the police, I began talking to them about how they needed to carry themselves and how they needed to behave if and when they should be stopped by police officers. And that's simply, unfortunately, because of the color of their skin. And I have to tell you, it worries me every night for the future of my kids and of all the other Black and brown children in the United States of America. And I shouldn't have to worry about that. And our children shouldn't have to worry about that. So it's a very scary time, and we need to take some drastic steps to make sure that our citizens here in the state of Maryland feel safe and protected when they go out in the public.
Delegate Atterbury, of course, it's just been 5 years since the death of Freddie Gray, and all of these matters got the full attention of the legislature after that. Is there anything specifically that the legislature could have done a better job of 5 years ago and needs to be revisited now?
So, you know, I was newly elected in 2014, and I served on that police accountability work group. And I have to tell you, I think we made strides in that work group, and we came a long way from where we had been. For instance, we made it so that citizens could participate on trial boards, and we made those trial boards open to the public. We changed the way that training is done in terms of requiring de-escalation and anti-discrimination standards and trainings. And we did a lot of other great things. So I absolutely think we need to go back and take a look at those things. And specifically in terms of training, we need to require training more than every 2 years, I think, and not just at the entry level. We obviously need to take a look at the use of force. We need to take a look at chokeholds and banning chokeholds. So while I'm proud and stand by the work that group did, if we worked collaboratively with the community and with the police, we absolutely need to take a look at that again.
Let me remind our viewers, if you have a question on this topic, you can email it to us. Email address livequestions@mpt.org. Delegate Atterbury, the law enforcement officer's Bill of Rights, frequently up for discussion in this context. What are the points of contention there? For people who've never heard of it, what does it do, and could that be under the microscope again?
We are going to be taking a look at the law for LEOBR. Excuse me, I got tongue-tied there. We took a look at that in 2015 and 16 at that work group. And I think what we need to do is see how involved citizens can be when it comes to police misconduct, and how involved and how much transparency and accountability that the citizens deserve when there have been incidents of police misconduct. The law enforcement's Bill of Rights precludes a lot of that. It precludes a lot of firing when an incident has happened, and so we need to take a look at that. Perhaps. And I will suggest that, when there has been an obvious shooting or murder or brutality to a community member, a citizen of the state of Maryland, an officer shouldn't necessarily just be suspended with pay. They should be immediately terminated. So we need to take a look at that and make some changes here in our state.
Some people see a trade-off between tight oversight and effectiveness of the police. You look at the nonstop problem of homicides in Baltimore. You have a police force operating under a federal judge's oversight at this point, and some see the police officers themselves basically sitting back in a defensive position. Is there such a trade-off?
Is there a trade-off between oversight and community policing? Statistics show that when you do tighten the police force, that the shootings and murders and violent offenses by police officers go down. Statistics show that when you have required tactics to be used by the police, when police are trained to use specific tactics to de-escalate before they shoot or before they use other measures, then those cities that require that, those jurisdictions have less incidents of police murders against the citizens. So I think that taking a look at that is necessary here in the state of Maryland. Do we want to specify what type of tactics that the police are going to use? And that's something we absolutely need to take a look at. In the past, the police have said to us in the General Assembly, well, all situations are different, and we can't go through a checkbox in our head before we react. But the more training that a police officer has, then the more that training, it will be an involuntary reaction. They will do that training as opposed to shooting first, as opposed to punching a citizen in the face first. They will go to what they know in terms of their training. So I think that mandating specific training and certain responses to citizens is something we should look at.
There was a Dan Roderick's column in the Baltimore Sun pointing out that in this crisis, we are sadly lacking the voice of Elijah Cummings, calming, authoritative. Two-part question: What would he be saying individually to people and to the community at large? And is there anybody out there that you would point to who could carry on that role today?
Mm-hmm. That's a tough question, because I think Congressman Elijah Cummings is irreplaceable. I had the honor of working with him out here in Howard County, and he actually stopped me at a Labor Day picnic and said, I want you to work with me and form a group called Courageous Conversations. And through that, we worked with churches here out in Howard County to have conversations with folks who came together of different races, different ethnicities, to try to understand each other. And he wanted that to be faith-based. So I think one of his messages, which I certainly couldn't speak for him ever, but he would say, yes, you have a right to be outraged. You have a right to protest. You have a right to be sad and mad and feel frustrated and distraught after decades and decades of the same treatment, of being treated like animals by various members of the police department. But I think he would also remind us that we need to be peaceful when we do this, that we need to protect our communities, because if we don't protect our communities, who else is going to do that for us? We need to protect where we live. We need to protect those that are vulnerable among us. So we need to, while we protest, we need to be peaceful about it. And we also need to take action. He was a man very, very much about action. And he would say, contact your state and local officials and work with them and to try to get this done here in the state of Maryland.
Delegate, I just have 30 seconds, but a terrific email question just came in. What can be done to improve the quality of the candidates who are employed as police officers, not besmirching everybody who's currently a police officer? What can we do to improve that in the future?
I have always believed, and I live in Howard County. I don't live in a city, but I strongly believe that officers and first responders need to be able to live where they work so that they're tied to the community, that they're vested in the community. I think each jurisdiction needs to make a concerted effort to reach out to the community, to reach out to African Americans, to Latinos, to Asian Americans, to bring them in to the police force so that when they're out in the community, we see reflections of ourselves. We see people at the market. We see people at the malls and at the stores, and we know they're on the police force, and we're all a member of the same community.
Delegate Atterbury, thank you so much for your time. We will follow up on your work in the weeks and months ahead. We're joined now by veteran civil rights attorney A. Dwight Pettit. Mr. Pettit, nice to talk to you as always. We have done this on so many occasions in the past. So let me just broadly ask your thoughts about the case in Minneapolis and the protests that have followed.
Well, it's definitely horrible and tragic, and it's something that has stained our nation across this country or across the world. One of my thoughts, I think you and I talked about it earlier, Jeff, was that I wrote a book, and my book was called Under Color of Law. But I think I should have named the book Under Color of Law and Under Cover of Darkness. And the reason I say that is because under color of law means people with authority and badges and so forth have been allowed under the law to commit these atrocities. But part of the ability to do that was also the fact that there was no ability to bring to light their actions until the event of technology and video. And so now we're seeing in the last 10 years or so, those things that, as you know, being on your show, Jeff, that I've argued about for the last 40 or 50 years of my practice. And I could go through people who have been shot or killed so tragically that it would astonish the video audience or the TV audience to see those actions today in terms of living color, as I say, on television. I mean, I could go back through certain persons like Larry Hubbard, who was shot in the back of the head while being handcuffed on his stomach. I can go back to the West case, Tyrone West, which is kind of recent. There was no video there and no prosecution. And, the case was not, in fact, followed through on in terms of the criminal prosecution. I could go back Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sir, I was just going to say this case, the Minneapolis case, might have been difficult to make. You made a lot of difficult cases in court over the decades. This would have been possibly a difficult one in court without the videotape. With the videotape, there's nobody, I haven't heard anybody disputing anything about what happened.
Well, here's what you have to realize, Jeff. One of the major defenses in this case, on these cases, is not the fact of what happened. Here, everybody saw what happened. The difficulties in proving these cases, both as a matter of law as well as a matter of fact, deals with the law as we know it. We have a thing now on the books which is called qualified immunity. If the police don't know all the law that they're supposed to know, they can be protected by the law in terms of prosecution. We saw that on the Freddie Gray case when those guys were prosecuted and were dismissed. So there are many things in the law which have helped to, in fact, protect police action that exists now and are being used by the defense and being used by jurisdictions who don't want to, in fact, go forward on these cases. It's just the law has become much more difficult in terms of winning these cases. And one of the things that I'd like to point out also, Jeff, one of the biggest things that, believe it or not, is not the evidence of what happened, even when we can prove that, even without the video. Do you know what the biggest issue becomes? The biggest issue becomes the criminality involved is whether or not the police action was the cause of death. We just today, in the Floyd case, got the medical examiner's decision that this was murder and was as a result of the officer's action. But that's not as easily done as you would think. In most of the cases that I've had, in terms of West and in terms of other cases where people were strangled or put to death or put in harm's way, the defense says, hey, this was a pre-existing condition. It was a heart attack. It was a hot day. He was wrestling with the police. When you go to court, you've got to prove that the causation of death was, in fact, the police action. And so you would be surprised that the defenses that are raised as a matter of law and a matter of connection in terms of criminal prosecution and civil prosecution. So it's not as easy as it looks on video, but video has helped a lot. We had one of the biggest and first video cases. Do you remember the Jamie Quarles case? That was one of the first in the nation. Young man that was shot down in Lexington Market. Police
I just have a minute, sir. But
I'm sorry.
Let me point out something a lot of people have noticed, which is in the protests, not the window smashing, looting stuff, but the peaceful protests. It's a diverse group, and it may be a diverse group looting too. But does that give you reason for optimism? And what does it take to get from that to concrete action? And I just have time for a few sentences on that.
Well, I think it is a very good thing because we need all the coalitions that we can bring to bear, because to solve these issues, it's going to take legal action in terms of the change of the laws. I told you the laws so far have been against people's rights in terms of police brutality. So you're going to need political action. We know in Baltimore City right now, we're facing an election tomorrow. Well,
Sir, we're going to have to leave it there. That is the famed civil rights attorney, A. Dwight Pettit. Sir, thank you very much. Now, MPT's Charles Robinson talked today with writer and Professor D. Watkins.
What comparisons can you make to what went on in the Freddie Gray case and what's going on now with the Floyd case?
So one thing I will say is that, which is pretty unfortunate, a whole lot of Black people have been murdered. Unarmed Black people have been murdered by police officers. The number of Black people murdered by police officers since 2012 is like over 1,600 men and at least like 80 women. So it happens a lot. Some of these cases go viral and some of them don't. Freddie Gray's case went viral because it came at the foot end of a bunch of other police murders. So they was jumping from state to state to state. And we were seeing the same thing. These unarmed Black people were being murdered by police officers, and then the cops were never held accountable. So by the time it reached Baltimore, it was kind of a tipping point. I think the similarity between Freddie Gray and George Floyd is that you have a video, you have a bunch of people who are anxious, you have a bunch of people who are tired of dealing with these oppressive systems. And with Floyd, I think that is people been in a house for over 2 months dealing with the pandemic. So many people are out of work and not making money. So many people feel like the system hasn't been there for them. Since this last person became president, they feel even less, they have less of a stake in American society. So it's just like F it. And that was just kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. So I think the cases are very similar. I hope that the result is different. I hope and pray that no one else is hurt. And I hope that the police officers actually does go to jail. A lot of people don't know this, but I try to tell people every chance I get. The 6 officers involved in the killing of Freddie Gray they're still Baltimore City police officers right now. They're working, they got back pay, they're taking care of their families, they're doing well. They even tried to sue because they felt like they did nothing wrong, even though he was totally fine and he died in their custody.
I know a lot of folks who are not of our community will wonder what are those things, those elements that made this so universal. Can you talk to that?
I think the elements is just the history of police culture in general, and that's why so many people relate. I think there's a lot of white people who are sick and tired of seeing how police treat people of color. They're tired of it. So when they get to the point where they're tired of something that they don't got to deal with, then you're creating this universal pull and this effect where everybody feels like they want to get involved and they want to do something and they want to be in the streets and they want to protest, and some of them even want to take it a level higher and get violent. That's been the case.
I guess I know you, like I, just worry that the wrong elements sometimes are in these groups. And there were elements like that in the Freddie Gray case. How do you look at that?
It's difficult when we talk about the wrong elements because the system allows wrong elements to happen inside of their own system. So it's like, you know, I don't advocate violence. I don't want to see people get hurt. I know some of them kids personally. I taught some of those kids who are still arrested because of what happened in Baltimore in 2015. They're still trying to piece their lives back together, even though so many activists and revolutionary types who go on tour and speaking engagements talking about, we were in Baltimore, we in the streets. And I'm like, no, you wasn't. You was in a house, because me and Devin was at everything. We didn't go there to incite or to add to violence. We went there to document it because it was historical. So we're documentarians. We're going around and we're taking pictures and we're writing and we're putting this information together so that real narratives are out there. If people are doing something peaceful, you need to know. If police officers are doing things they shouldn't be doing, you need to know. Somebody has to hold the system accountable. So
I don't know about you, but I am surprised at the global reach of this incident. I have seen reports from out of South Africa. I've seen reports from out of Paris and all over the globe, literally.
New Zealand, did you see New Zealand?
Yeah.
New Zealand, it stretched for blocks. Oh my God.
Right. Why are people so connected to this? I mean, is it the humanity issue that's driving this? I know you talk about the police, but is part of that the humanity of it?
I also think that, the more you look into George Floyd and the more you see what kind of person he was, and you see his videos and you see, like you just said, the humanity of who he was, I think that's something that struck a nerve in people too. Because we're coming off of Ahmaud Arbery, the young man who was gunned down in Georgia for jogging down the street. We're coming off Breonna Taylor, the young woman who was in her house when the police raided the wrong house and murdered her. So we're coming off of this, and then this happens with a clear video, and then you look into the person who it happened to, and you're like, wow, he was a rapper. Wow, he was an activist. Wow, he was working to be a pastor. Wow, he was a person that had a voice in his community. He was telling young people to put the guns down, to get off the street. He was telling old people, older guys, you're not a big brother and you're not a good friend if you're not out here advocating for these young people. He was posting videos saying that positive stuff, saying some of the stuff that, we wish our uncles and fathers would have said to us, but a lot of them wasn't really around. He was doing that stuff. So I think when you see that and you're like, wow, he's just like dude from my neighborhood. He's just like dude from up the street, regardless of what color you are. If it doesn't strike a nerve, then you're not human.
I want to kind of end on this. There is a big rally tonight in Baltimore. What are your hopes for that rally? The good news, we haven't seen the type of violence that's spread across this country. But what are your hopes for tonight's rally?
I hope people get to connect and fellowship. I hope people get to express themselves and be heard. And I hope that there's not a trace of violence. Like, I just don't, I don't want to see anybody get in trouble. I don't want to see anybody, you can be the number one front revolutionary, whatever type of person, and then as soon as they put them cuffs on you and you get them charges, you're not coming home. You're gonna be sitting for 5 years. I also hope that people wear masks because the pandemic isn't over, and I just, I don't want to see people get sick. I don't want to, I don't want people to get sick because, we still fighting that too, and African Americans have been suffering at a higher rate. So, I don't want us to forget that.
D. Watkins, thanks for joining us here on Maryland Public Television.
Thank you.
And Charles tells us the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus is hosting an online forum on these issues on Wednesday. We'll have information on that and a link at our social media accounts. Look for MPT News on Twitter and Facebook. Join us Friday for State Circle. We'll have updates on Election Day coming up tomorrow. We'll find out who may be the next mayor of Baltimore. Thanks for watching and have a good night.
This program was made by MPT to serve all of our diverse communities.